Ito into the church, and then she'd recluse for 4 or 6 months, right? So I stand up in front of this pickup truck. I'm hearing screams. I can smell and taste the blood. I can't see anything. Davidson coming up the road. A Harley Davidson coming up the road at 1 in the morning. At 1 in the morning, on top of a mountain. And the woman comes over and she's like, "Come here, honey." And she leads me over to the side, and she lays me down on the ground. And I remember feeling her from her jacket, and I passed out. And came up. I woke up 3 days later. My brother was right next to me, off the dashboard. We were in the hospital for a couple weeks, but that was my first on that side of the mountain. I've never seen nothing like that. And you're telling me that there's 2 bikers up on the side of the mountain at 1 in the morning, and they come up on us as she gets in, and everything's going great. You know, she's still drinking, still doing drugs. She's still part of the organization, every other week, a lot of fighting, a lot of drugs. And I remember we were going to church, and church way back in the rural part of the state, right? And I loved going to church. And then we just stopped. Apparently the pastor had sat there and started pulling funds, and he was just pulling funds to pay for his cars and pay for his manipulator, right? But he can't control us. He can do everything he can to sit there and manipulate the situation. But if he can't control something, with my mother, because she never really regained from that. Her alcoholism and her lifestyle continued. I think that the greatest thing that she ever taught me, that I could, the biggest and the best educator in a situation. And one of the things that she taught me was I continued going, and I met some amazing people. And I came to a point in my life, driving the whole 9 yards, right? And then the Lord said, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you just go up there and talk to him?" And I said, "Crap." And so here I am, okay? So, I don't know if you guys have ever had encounters with angels or anything like that. I don't know if I certainly do. I know that there are denominations out there that kind of shy away from that. But the second that church, and she was hurting, man. I mean, she was tore up. You could tell that really, really, really affected her, because I believe that she was reaching for, but that was the actions of a man. That is not God, And I think that if she would have linked up with someone, what happened is God kept on intervening in our lives. And that is an amazing thing, because I think that's the only reason why I'm here at this point. Year after that happened, there's black ice everywhere. And my mother was trucking up this hill, and at the back of this hill, it kind of curved around and goes up. Right at the back of this hill, there was a river spinning, but we're not going anywhere. It was me and my 3 brothers and my mother in the car, and then we started to slide back, right? So we're going to go back, and we're going to go back in that river in the middle of November, December, the 3 of us and my mother. There's nobody around, and this dude just rolls up casually like nothing's going on. There's no houses anywhere. And he says, "I got you." He's like, "Ma'am, can I help?" And at the top of that hill, she had to pull over on the side of the road, right? And she just started weeping. And but it wasn't enough. Sometimes in life, trauma is going to be an anchor for you, a spiritual anchor for you. And so, fast forward, I'm 12 years old, and I get a call on the phone. He's like, "Boy, this is your father." Boop. I just hung up on him immediately. For the look on my mother's face, white as a sheet. So the guy calls back about 2 minutes later. "I'm sorry, but I told you that your father was dead, but he is not. It was the best thing that I could do for you. He was involved in like I said, that the Cossacks. His entire life, he'd been with you. And we had a conversation. I was like, sure, I want to meet the guy. So he shows up about 2 weeks later. I told you that he was dead. I'm talking about a spiritual, dark heaviness every time that man was around me. And he was around for maybe 2 weeks. And there was a day in which my mother walked into the house and said, if he comes back here again, I want you to use this. Days later, she was at work, and he shows up at the house. He had a prostitute on the back of the bike. And I opened the door, and he was walking up the stairs, and I grabbed that third. That's it. And the band, I'll never forget it. The band was called Wasp. It's a band during the 80s. I don't know if that's where that darkness came from. So he was still practicing 100%. But I never, the last time that I saw him, he was in prison. I went up, saw him in prison, and he got out. And I said, listen, I'm trying to get a hold of my dad. I'd really like to, try and reconnect. And at that time, man, I was brand new in the church. They found him in a pay-by-the-hour motel up in Seattle. And the only thing that I said is, oh, okay, I appreciate you telling me that. And it was crazy because all of this time that I have these crazy experiences with this family that is so dysfunctional. When my father left that house, my mother was terrified, She had a boyfriend, and she was like, hey, you know what? I'll see you in a couple weeks. And he didn't come over. Later on that night, my brother, I think he was 8 years old, he's looking out. He said, Mommy, there's angels above our house. To serve a God that will go out of his way and to allow that child to sit there and see him, it's an amazing thing, right? So I think that it's natural for us to understand the why of something. So fast forward a couple years, I'm in the military, was in the Word and in church, and they were awesome. And it was crazy. He looked at me quizzically, right? Looking at me. He was like, Jason, the Lord has a calling on your life that you need to answer. Brush it off and go about my business. And then it happened again and again and again. And so for pastors, I don't really have an understanding of Christ. The only thing that I have an understanding of is violence, drugs, alcohol, dysfunction. I understand that very, very well. There was a men's retreat. And at the time, my wife, she was like, maybe you should go to that. Now, what terrifies me is being exposed spiritually in front of God and opening that up, right? Perfection, right? How many times do you hear a pastor sit there and say, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you do this, you're going to hell. And then they follow up with, hey, you know what? The only person that was ever in the history of mankind perfect is Christ. But you have, if I cannot conform or if I cannot meet that standard, right? So I fought, and every single pastor who you're talking to, but that is, somebody lied to you. And it took God showing up personally in my life for me to understand exactly that those people were not crazy and that those people we just need the numbers. God has a plan for you, right? It's kind of the catchphrase with televangelists, right? So to Iraq, and so we had been in Iraq. It's kind of similar to the take helicopters to go in, and we do what we do, and then we take a helicopter out, right? So we had this at that point, and we felt invincible, right? We felt invincible. So we get up on this bird, right? And the lieutenant, my platoon leader, he said he's reading out the chocks, right? We're getting all rock and roll, getting ready, right? The way the military works is that once you operate with that unit, you stay with that unit. They don't make changes because that throws off the rhythm. Guys go in and kick the doors and take care of business, right? And then you have your support element. Support element is there to back up your assault element. And he made this change. Angry, right? Who are you to take me away from my Marines? So I was going to get up and I was going to march over there. So I stood up and I took one step and I took another step, and every cell in my body responded. I heard a voice in my listen, and I mean I heard it where I was in the mountains. If I was 30,000 feet up in the air, I heard. And so I'm sitting there, 1 foot up in the air. The guy literally caught me in mid-stride. And if it doesn't make sense, I'm going to push, right? And for the first time in my life, I was like, okay, cool, whatever, We fly very low, very, very fast, and that's to avoid RPG on the bunk, and everybody's, just talking, Second bird comes in about 45 minutes later, and, right, something wrong. And they just had just like there was nothing there, it's just blank. So I stood up and I was like, what's going on? They said, Doc, the bird went down. One thing we saw was a fireball. The story that came out of the Marine Corps is that the pilot he hit so hard that the biggest piece of the bird was. So we're battle-hardened Marines, right? We've been fighting for months. And I thought to myself, just weeping, And I keep together for 20 minutes, and I'm sitting there talking with these guys. And I get them calmed down, surgical unit, and just fall apart, right? Stress that enough. It was the most terrifying and peaceful thing that I've ever experienced. And I'm not function I came from. I thought everybody got, food stamps up until I was nobody, right? And the only thing that I was ever good at was fighting. The only thing that I was ever good at was in the middle of a war. And, my wife at the time, she's, praising God. She's, God spared you. But I had such a heaviness on my heart that I couldn't really get past the guilt of what had happened. He saw her 3 times on video. And he wasn't even supposed to be there. I mean, they pulled this guy out of a drop you into the worst conflict of the Iraq War. And he survives every firefight and every interaction that we had. So again, confirmation, right? Confirmation, but this time terrifies me. Because I realized that all these people, all these pastors and all these people that right? And I felt such a overwhelming sense of inadequacy. I'm fighting, I'm spiritually fighting every single day. And I'm trying to get past. Who here has a psych background? Nobody? Okay. So what you're hearing is called trauma stacking, right? So you go from one trauma to another trauma to another trauma, and that's the only thing that you're comfortable with. right? Of all with the pastor, right? But I want to know more about this God. I want to know more about this guy that pulled me off this bird 40. Do anything I can. And it was crazy. So, who here believes in visions? You guys believe in visions? Did you believe that there were Christians and there were pastors that what you saw was a manifestation of something that you wanted to see, and so it wasn't real? You know how many times I heard that? And we just got beat up, man. And so I was in bed. I was hovering above myself in bed, and I was sleeping. And so there's a flash of light, right? Flash of light, and then all of a sudden I'm in the back of my church, and I'm in the back of my church. And the sound message I've ever heard in my life. I've never heard anything. And the crazy thing is that this guy that was preaching, there was flame was going across the pews, and it was hitting these people that were sitting in the pews. And you literally saw these demons getting pulled up out of people. And God said that was you. That's you. That's what you're supposed to be doing for my kingdom. Saying words that I didn't even understand. I had no comprehension of any of this stuff. I didn't understand. I don't know what this is, but I'll do it. Let's rock and roll. Let's do this. And I rushed to my pastor. I rushed to my chaplain. I never had an encounter with God like that. That was a manifestation of your mind, right? And so I became. A couple years go by. And I meet up with this group at the hospital. You're supposed to come up to this church. You're supposed to sit in these pews, and whatever is going on with these spirits. And there are too many churches nowadays that water down the gospel, and they don't want to talk about what's real. They want to hold you accountable for the hypocrisy of the Christian church was so heavy in me, and I could not sign on to something like that. Authentic Christians, spirit-filled, strong warrior Christians that I've ever seen in my life, and I'm talking about people that used to be and that was the church that Jesus Christ himself spoke about. Those are the people that Christ would have been sitting. That was a Wednesday night, offshoot of a church that wanted to have, some sort of ministry on the side, but they did. It was nuts. And you know how I got to that? I went to a church, and I need you to check out this group called CR. Take a look at it with them for about 3 months. Come back, let us know. We want to get it started here in the church. Spoke with pastors, spoke with people, and everything was consistent. Okay, I'm not saying it's perfect. Okay, nothing's perfect because it's man-made, right? To the pastor, and I was like, and listen, I had this guy. How much time do I have? I'm sorry, I'm rambling. This guy comes with me. He was referred by 4 different pastors, and we start doing a presentation, right? No problem at all. He gives me a call the next morning. Do you know who you brought in this church? I have no idea, but I know of 4 pastors, and the whole community knows about him, and so the whole church was in uproar because he was in this church. I said, needless to say that didn't really work out too well in that church, right? But then I come here, right? I'm fast forwarding a lot. I'm sorry, I'm into an SDA church in my life, right? And so we sat down and talked, and I tell him a little bit about myself, and he was like, "Man, we're going to do this." I was like, "Yes, sir, I can. Yes, sir, I can." Right? So, regardless of where you are in your walk, regardless of where you are in your life, regardless of your past, I don't care. You know what? You missed your calling. You missed your calling because you said no, and that God has moved on from you. And then I was like, "What is going on? I'm doing everything you want me to, and every door that you have me open, it closes." And he responded back immediately. He said, "You are not living, seeing there's real, like a movie script going of every time that he opened the door, every time that he called me to ministry, every time that I said no. I will, everything." And then 2 weeks later, I sit down with Pastor Joe, and he was like, "Start this program with me. Serve. Please consider coming up and just checking it out, okay? It'll be terrifying. It'll be awesome. It'll be beautiful. I promise you, you're going to love it."
All right. Thank you so much for. And then I want you guys to ask him a million more when we head over to the fellowship hall. I will take the one question. Oh, you want the one question? Okay, we got one question, and then we'll close.
Let us know how we can help you in February, because a lot of us are in the medical field. So my question would be, are you Seventh-day Adventist, and are you interested in studying like the Bible with us?
I am not Seventh-day Adventist yet, but I will say this, and I'll say this with as much honesty and purity as I can, is that as what I've seen here. You know, beauty or wealth or family or community, and it's all nonsense, and behind those doors it's rot. And that is exactly why I'm still here, you know, because the minute that I see that rot, I can't stay there any longer. There's no sound scripture doctrine there. If you're cutting out from the scripture, then you're not preaching. Beat me into submission at some point. Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you for hearing his testimony and hearing his heart, you guys. Give him a little pray, and then we're going to go pack some boxes. Father in heaven, thank you so much for Brother Jason to share his heart with us. Thank you for giving be blessed by it. Let there be fellowship, and help us to get to know Jason even